Synergize, unscripted conversations where we explore the evolving role of the financial advisor in an emerging AI-driven world. Join us as we bring together thought leaders across a range of disciplines and industry experts, sharing insights designed to help RIAs thrive in the industry of tomorrow.
Welcome back to Synergize. I'm Bill Capel, Chief Client Growth Officer at Trade PMR, a Robinhood company.
And I'm Ryan Neal, Editorial Manager at Trade PMR Robinhood. And Bill, last night I had a conversation with my mother that I don't know if I was ready for. She called me to say she was meeting with the attorneys, meeting with her financial advisor to do a will planning and estate planning and trust, all that stuff, and wanted to make sure that I wouldn't be personally offended if she named my sister the power of attorney, because she's closer in proximity. She's on the West Coast. I'm on the East Coast. My mom lives in Sacramento. And, got me thinking, perfect timing for our episode, because we have a guest today who talks all about this kind of stuff, about, financial advisors spend so much of their time retirement planning, portfolio planning, but what about what comes after that? When health issues arise and long-term care and death in the family, a lot of advisors still aren't bringing that into their practice.
You're so right, Ryan, and it's a really, really important issue. And it's the one thing that I think a lot of advisors are uncomfortable when it comes to actually the implementation of a plan, particularly when you're facing an end-of-life situation. And our guest today really has done an amazing job with a book she's written around what it's like to contemplate these kinds of challenges and where your advice as an advisor becomes extremely important in building relationships, not only for the immediate generation, but for those that follow.
That's right. Our guest is Beth Pinsker. She's the author of My Mother's Money, A Guide to Financial Caregiving. She's also a certified financial planner and a retirement columnist at MarketWatch with decades of financial journalism under her belt. So Beth, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, let's get right into it, because Beth, you're really, I really admire that you've been willing to, take your own personal experience and share it through this book. As well as the work you've done both in journalism as well as being a CFP. You've seen a lot. Give us a little bit of background, if you will, and tell us how this came about. What motivated you to write this book? What was that experience that really triggered it?
What triggered it was living through it and realizing how little there is out there as a practical matter for going through this. I have a lot of book learning. I know a lot of things. I studied a lot. I passed a lot of tests, but that doesn't tell you what people go through in real life and the problems that they encounter with the systems we have in place in this country. And what I wanted to do is serve as people's cautionary tales. It's sort of like, I lived through this hard stuff. I'm going to explain it to you so that you don't have to go through something hard like I had to go through. And maybe we can just sort of share a little knowledge. My Mother's Money is written about me and my mom. My mom was a school teacher. She was a high school teacher. And this is sort of like her last lesson that she had to give out to people. And she was a part of the first half of the book when I was caring for her while she was incapacitated. And then her spirit is with me as the second half of the book unfolds, and I am taking care of her estate.
Well, so what I think is really interesting is you're both a financial columnist and a CFP, and you know this stuff very well, but you wrote about, you encountered a lot of stress, a lot of confusion, a lot of emotional times. So when we talk about, financial advisors may feel uncomfortable about bringing this into their practice, that's probably why, right? Like, it's very stressful, intense conversation. So how are you able to navigate that? And I guess, do you have any lessons for advisors that maybe want to step into that?
Well, I think the role for advisors here is to be the frontline coach, basically. The advisors hear from their clients a lot, and they have, casual conversations with them, and they have, charts and graph conversations with them. And in the casual conversation is when you find out all of the stuff that's going on in their lives that's relevant to their finances, but might not be readily apparent, or that they might not even have put down on some sort of intake form. You call them up for a quarterly meeting and they're like, oh, I've been so stressed. My mom has been sick. Well, that should be, a light bulb moment for a financial advisor, where the financial advisor is like, okay, my client's mother is sick. Is this going to impact their finances? Because oftentimes it will. Your clients don't live in a bubble. They are connected to other people, both by blood and by community relationships. And you have to know, to advise them, you have to know who those people are. You have to know who's in their orbit, beyond just, mom, dad, son, daughter. There's more to it than that these days. There might be a disabled sibling who's an adult, and now their parents are gone, and so your client might be responsible for their older brother, their younger sister, or an aunt or an uncle, or a neighbor that they've taken a liking to. Like, things run deep in this country now. Like, we have a lot of people to take care of.
What's interesting about what you're saying there is reminds me of a quote out of the book, and I want to read it because I want you to expand upon it. But you're right. You had a lot of book knowledge, and in a situation demanded street smarts. And it's that crossover from knowing how to do things, right, and then the application of that in real time. And as advisors, we're trained how to do things. Where we're probably not as sharp as we need to is on two fronts, right? One is listening and kind of interpreting, and the other one is having that ability to have the right level of emotional intelligence to translate the technical stuff you're talking about into real life application. For you lived through this in real time. Share with our audience a little bit about when that aha moment struck you to say, well, I know this. I'm a CFP. I know all this stuff, but why is it so hard?
Yeah, so I mean, I got right into it. My mom had surgery on a Wednesday, or a Tuesday. I can't even remember at this point. And by Friday, the caregivers needed to be paid. Now, you can talk about budgets, you can be a financial planner, and you can work out the money on the back end, you can talk about portfolio construction or whatever. I am a person then, at that point, an adult child, sitting by my mother's bedside with a power of attorney documents in one hand and a checkbook in the other. And what am I supposed to do? This is what I mean by book learning meeting real life and street smarts. My choices at that moment, with the power of attorney that was not enacted at a bank, I can't legally sign the check for my mother in my name. And signing it with her signature, like her name, would be forging it, right? So I know as a professional that signing her name is wrong. I know also as a professional that signing my name without enacting the power of attorney first at the bank is wrong. So then my choice is, do I write a check for my own account, and cover the money for my mother, and hope to get it back, in my account at some point, or not. And this is what your clients are going through. This is what real people face. So if and 3 weeks after that, I realized that my mother's, or 2 weeks after that, realized that my mother's long-term care insurance premium was past due, and I had to write out a check for $6,800. The caregiver checks were $3,000. Um, so, all of a sudden I'm laying out a lot of money. I don't necessarily keep that much cash on hand in my real life. Like, as an advisor, you would tell people there's no need for you to have $20,000 in cash. You should be putting that money to work for you. Well, in real life, I needed to put my hands on it. And so if I had an advisor at that point, who wasn't me because I'm a CFP, and I don't have an advisor, but if I had one at that point, I would have called them up and said, I need to free up, $20,000 to cover costs for my mom, and I don't know when I'm going to put it back. So as an advisor, like, that might be the first call you receive to know that there is trouble happening right now. So what are you going to do? My suggestion is that the advisors sort of step up as soon as they notice that there's an issue brewing, and say, hey, I think you should have a family meeting, and have everybody come, Zoom or whatever, and put all the family cards on the table. Here's what mom has, here's what dad has, here's what brother and sister have to contribute, here's who can come in an emergency, here's who can pay in an emergency. Here are all the resources at the disposal of the primary people involved, and see where you are on that. And then the advisor is there to do the math, because this is not math regular people can do. This is math that your software does. This is math that your financial calculator does, where you can compute contributions, coming in from income, Social Security, pensions, and whatnot, and interest growing at the same time you're taking money away. Um, nobody can do that on the back of an envelope or in their head.
Not to interrupt, but particularly in an emotional moment that you're describing.
Yeah,
This is again an example where book smarts meets street smarts, right? And just to add on to that, um, what you're pointing out here, which I think is incredibly important, I want to underscore this for our audience, is that you got to get everybody involved in the family. You've got to sit down. The reality here is that this is not the time to put your head in the ground. You
yeah.
don't want your emotions to override the mission of caring for that loved one in a manner that provides dignity, that provides comfort. And certainly that's what's going to give you peace of mind. At what point did that hit you? When did you actually have that experience?
That hits so it just hits immediately. Like, I knew nothing about my mom's life before I stepped in to run her finances. She called me up and said, I'm having surgery. Can you come take care of things? At that moment, she was a 76-year-old human being who had full control over her life, was a fully cognizant human being, and lived a full life. It's not like a child you're taking care of, who's 17 and has been under your thumb their whole lives, and has $12 in the bank. My mom had a mortgage, she had utility payments, she had annuity contracts, she had all sorts of things going on in her life. And as my father had died 5 years prior to her getting sick, and it was all in her head. She didn't have to consult with anybody. She just did whatever she wanted to do as a fully fledged adult.
Mm.
When I stepped in, I was like, oh my god, how do you pay your electric bill? Where's the coupon for your quarterly maintenance payment? Where, like, why do I keep finding envelopes with cash in the middle of papers in your
Oh my
drawers? Like,
goodness.
I don't understand your financial thinking. I don't know where anything is.
So did she
And
work with an advisor at all? Did she have her own advisor or not at all?
she had an advisor for certain select things. My parents were both teachers, and they lived in that 403B
Sure.
world, um, which is sort of, back in the olden days, when they were setting all of this stuff up. So she didn't regularly consult with anybody. But my mom was pretty on top of things, and she was engaged, and she made decisions for herself, and she knew exactly what she was doing and what she wanted. She was just extremely risk averse, as a human being. And we had a cash crisis at the beginning of her illness, and I ran the numbers, and it was June, and I said, okay, we have enough cash to last until August, but her RMDs don't come out of her account until December. I need to speed up that process because I need money, a significant amount of money in August that I could not cover without breaking into my retirement. And so the money's got to come out of somebody's accounts in August to fund, $15,000 a month in care costs. And where are we going to bridge the gap between August and December? We need money. um, and that was a problem. It was going to cost us money to get access to our own money. And I wouldn't have been happy with that situation. It turns out that life, has its own plans. And my mom didn't make it to August of that year. So we didn't need to go through any of those steps. But, an advisor can't tell you that that's going to happen either,
Right.
So,
But what it does point to, Beth, is an important issue that you're raising, which is there's a big difference between a plan and reality, right? And
yes.
I know as an advisor, for me, the hardest conversations, oddly enough, we're trying to get clients to think a little bit more than 2 weeks out or a month out or 6 months out. Usually say, so in any kind of a scenario, how much cash should we have on the side, right? This concept of being fully invested, I think we've got to really break that down a little bit further to say fully invested means your resources available when you need them at an appropriate time. And what you're saying here is, well, on paper, that insurance contract, likely an annuity of some kind, was set up to distribute an ample amount of income at a point in time, but it didn't recognize what life is really like. And that's what I'm kind of hearing you saying. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, or just diversification in general. If my mom had had 75% of her savings in that vehicle, and 25% in something that I could access more readily, that would have even been helpful. She had 100% of her money, locked in something that had a 5-year surrender cap on it, and to go in before the 5 years would have, cost some sort of surrender fee, and we were before the 5 years. So, um, you know, that's fine for some of your money, but maybe not for all of your money. And that's where guidance can come into play. She also may have, and it's hard for me to go back and track all of her ins and outs. She might have had other money set aside, but she might have spent through it,
Yeah.
and that was the remaining money was all locked up. But the guidance of of an advisor could have helped her, um, you know, diversify as she went, so that she never ended up with 100% of her money locked up. And I think that's the thing. The situation is, the person who was guiding her, um, to on that path, who was managing that contract, um you know is not going to get the next generation on board, right? So, like, as soon as my mom passed away and that money had to be moved somewhere else, I was not, for instance, going to stay in that same contract with that same broker who had, guided my mom to it. I'm not the same age as my mother. I don't have the same risk tolerance. That wasn't a relationship that I was going to keep. And I think what a lot of advisors face, if they don't deal with the whole family at some point, is there's a death at some point. It could even be a divorce, some sort of split in the family, um, and you don't retain the assets in your management that family had. And if you go the next step and engage the other family members, even if it's a husband and wife, or two spouses of any gender, and one is involved in the financial planning and the other isn't, that's often a time when the relationship deteriorates. The primary spouse who was dealing with the money passes away. The spouse is left to deal with the money. If they don't have a relationship with the advisor that's close enough, they're just gonna leave.
Yeah. Well, you just hit on so many of the things that we talk about a ton on this show, right, Bill? Is building those relationships across generations and across the whole family. I know part of the work you do is talking to financial advisors and getting them on board so they can start serving families in this way. And that's also part of, I think, why you wrote the book. Can you talk about what you still see out there when you do meet with advisors, when you do talk to them? Where are their gaps and where are they still getting things wrong? And how can they improve to make this more of a part of the service they offer?
Yeah, I still see a lot of one party in the family is interested and making decisions, and the other party couldn't tell you where the tax returns are kept. Like, couldn't tell you anything. I see this still in my own family with other family members, and if the person who's managing things gets sick, um, the whole family kind of goes under because
Sure.
it's a all hands on deck emergency at that point. I see it with myself. I'm a divorced adult human being. My power of attorney, trustee, whoever takes over for me in an emergency is my 19-year-old son. Um, so I have to have a financial system that makes sense to somebody who doesn't have, much life experience handling, upper level family finances. And I still see that a lot where there's one person and everything that gets managed in the household is in that person's head
Mm.
and nobody else knows. And to be honest, the only person who, if that person has an advisor of any sort, that's the only other person who would know how to handle things. So then that advisor becomes the key point of contact when something bad goes down. And that person has to step in and guide the spouse or the other family member who doesn't know anything.
So along those lines, the transfer of the relationship, let's put the wealth aside, but the transfer of the relationship from one parent to the next generation of the advisor is almost more valuable than the assets that are involved here. How do
Yeah.
you coach advisors to prepare to engage differently with those different generations?
Well, I think one of the things is, and I wrote an article about this recently, is how many advisors still will have meetings with just like one partner in a couple, and without even thinking about it. Like, I know that there are time constraints and it's hard to negotiate people's schedules and all sorts of things like that. And you might truly get other spouses, who say, I'm not interested, just talk to the other party. And you gotta fight past that. Like, you shouldn't be having consequential meetings to decide the finances of a couple without talking to both of them. Like, those meetings just shouldn't be happening. You should, as an advisor, be like, I can't very well make this decision without talking to both of you. Can we please make some time? Can I meet with, the one who's not interested separately? Maybe we could go to lunch. Maybe we could find an atmosphere where that person feels comfortable and engaged. I just keep hitting home the point over and over again that family is more than just the two people in a married couple. Like, you are responsible for your parents at the end of the day. And if they don't have their planning together, you're going to end up hurting your finances to help them in some way. So you have to think beyond, you have to think broader.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds so almost simple and basic. That's like, duh, why isn't everybody doing this? But we know that it's not happening. And I know personally, as I said in our introduction, I just had these conversations with my mother, who I know works with a financial advisor. I know he's aware of me. But I've never met the person. I've never met her advisor. He set up an account for my baby daughter, so his client's grandchild. But I've never had a conversation. They've never brought us into the meeting, and I just kind of find it wild. I'm like, you have two, possibly two generations of clients you could bring in, but it still just talks to my mom and no one else. So, anyway, I know we know it's an issue and it's a challenge to get the industry to change. But I do want to run to our wrap up here. Something we'd love to do on our podcast is to give one actionable piece of advice for our listeners out there. Give them something they can take back and implement to get on the path to start bringing these conversations into their practice. So, what would be your takeaway for them?
I would ask, this is something I ask at every presentation I do. How many of you have know that your primary clients have a power of attorney? A valid current power of attorney? How about their adult children over the age of 18? How about your parents or your client's parents in this sense? Like, you have to ripple out.
Mm.
Uh, like, don't just focus on what your clients have, but make sure everybody has the primary document you need if an emergency happens, and that is power of attorney.
That's great. I love that. That's a nice, succinct, great starting point for folks out there. Great. Well, thank you so much, Beth, for joining us. We appreciate having you. And as always, thank you everyone for listening. Wherever you're getting this podcast, whether it's YouTube, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else, if you could take that time to like, subscribe, share, hit the buttons, all the stuff, it helps the algorithm, and we really appreciate it. So thank you, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Yes, and I'd like to encourage our readers to do check out Beth's book, My Mother's Money. It's a wonderful story that will touch all of us at some point. Better to be prepared than wait for it to happen. Please tune in to our next episode where we'll share more insights and actionable ideas to help you grow your business. And remember, the challenge is yours to take advantage of what the future has to offer.
If you want to join the conversation or connect with us, please visit us at synergizepodcast.com. This content is provided for general information purposes only. The views expressed by non-affiliated guest speakers are their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinion of Trade PMR or its affiliates. Trade PMR and its affiliates do not endorse any guest speakers or their companies and therefore give no assurances as to the quality of their products and services. This channel is not monitored by Trade PMR. Trade PMR does not provide investment advice, tax advice, or legal advice. Trade PMR is a member of FINRA and SIPC. Trade PMR Inc. is registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, and the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board, MSRB. Trade PMR provides brokerage and account services to registered investment advisors. Custodial services provided by First Clearing. First Clearing is a trade name used by Wells Fargo Clearing Services, LLC. Member SIPC, a registered broker-dealer and non-bank affiliate of Wells Fargo & Company. Copyright 2026, Trade PMR Inc. For a transcript of this episode with sources, visit synergizepodcast.com.